Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Shocking breach of protocol on today's show. Normally it's Jeff Sentell on a Friday to talk Georgia recruiting, but the truth is Jeff is fresh off his vacation. Georgia could be on commitment watch tomorrow. We thought it might be a good idea to bring in Jeff Sentell and do some UGA recruiting talk one day early. We don't think you're going to complain about that. A lot of stuff for the Dogs, perhaps adding a key member to its 2027 class tomorrow. We'll give you the latest on that. And, oh, yeah, by the way, courtesy of Jeff Sentell, we'll also let you hear from that player on the program today, too. I think you're going to like it. Also, off the top today, one of the great former Dogs, one of our favorite guys, has challenged Georgia to get the most out of one key position group here in 2026. Obviously, you're going to agree with this. We'll give it to you here in a moment. But as a lead into that, if you don't mind, and a slight diversion maybe, I want to talk about what I thought was maybe the weirdest thing about SEC Media Days last week. Two diverging ideas that seem to kind of converge on each other. We'll do that. And I am, before we're done today, going to explain this. Why the most important question, arguably, facing Georgia football and its future has very little to do with Kirby Smart. We will talk about that coming up. We'll also make fun of Jon Sumrall, because why would you not? All of that's on the way, and we're glad to have you with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, I'm going to get to something in a moment that I think you're very much going to agree with. Former Dog that we love, challenging Georgia in a very specific way about what it needs to do here this upcoming season. That is coming up. Also, special Thursday guest for us, Jeff Sentell, talk some recruiting. Normally it's Friday. Today it's Thursday. You'll like that as well. Let me say this, though, before we get into the other stuff, and it's actually a lead into our opening topic. I thought there was one thing at SEC Media Days as it related to Georgia that was pretty weird. You'll remember Media Days was last week. It was in Tampa. There is a lot of talking from people who talk for a living. And sometimes all of the stuff that gets said, it can feel a bit inconsistent, and you're forced to try to make sense of it all. For instance, Georgia was picked to win the SEC when the media voting came out on Friday. I'm not upset about that, not mad about that. I was maybe slightly surprised by it. And I think what's weird to me about that is that a media contingent that voted Georgia as the most likely team to win the SEC, repeating as a back-to-back-to-back SEC champs were that to come true, the media that voted Georgia to do that at times during media days last week had some somewhat pointed questions in Georgia's direction. Now, it wasn't a bloodletting and it wasn't, incredibly intense, but it also wasn't without a little bit of tension and a little bit of drama. I think there are some people, and I don't even mean this like a negative way, but there are some people that have a storyline. Sometimes we say pushing a narrative that has a, excessively negative connotation to it. I don't know that it's pushing a narrative as much as it is maybe trying to establish a little bit of a storyline. This is what the story is for Georgia right now. And it's a story, at least in part, where some seem to think that, maybe Georgia's set in its ways. Is it okay to say it that way? Set in its ways a little bit as a program. Fair or not, that's the storyline that people were trying to form. And then weirdly enough, after all of that, they ended up voting Georgia to win the SEC when it was all said and done, which feels like a bit of a conflict, but whatever. That's the thing that gets pushed. Let me give you a couple of examples here, and some of this you may remember. There was the reporter that asked Kirby Smart about the possibility that your program, in a day and age in which everybody wants to be as maybe high-powered offensively as they can and spend gigantic sums of money on acquiring quarterbacks and tons of wide receivers and all of that, is Georgia content to be an outlier in that world? And I think that word outlier, I think that was a little bit of a problem for Kirby Smart because he pushed back on it just slightly. Remember this? This is from last week.
Those would be your words, not mine, because I like to think that we play good defense, we play good offense. Statistically, over the last 5 years, we've got the second most explosive plays in all of college football, and that's on offense. So, I think there's a misnomer probably because of the position I coach and my history and the defensive philosophy that it's like this. Oh, okay, we're just going to – no, we believe you have to run the ball. In the fourth quarter, there were probably 4 games last year that if we didn't run the ball for a first down and they knew we were going to run the ball because of the clock management, that you lose games or you give them another possession. And we're going to be – our identity is going to be physical. You can be physical in the pass game. You can be physical on the perimeter. We pride ourselves in those things as well. But I don't think that we're a anomaly or an exception. We just follow the rule of the book that when you have to run the ball, you have to be able to run the ball in games. There's going to come a time where every team has to do that. Doesn't mean you can't be explosive, and we certainly need to be more explosive. But when you do a 5-year study, 4-year study, you look at the numbers, Georgia's been in the top 5 of all those categories. So I like to think that our success has come from both offense, defense, and special teams.
So I think the majority of us agree, at least in principle, with everything that Kirby Smart is saying there. But we can also acknowledge this, as someone who talks for a living, lives in the media world pretty much all the time, that if it is true that you've got the second most explosive plays over the course of the last 5 years, but no one realizes that, and very few people I think probably do, if that is true, then, I would politely suggest that maybe you need to find a way to tell a better story. I don't just mean Kirby Smart. I mean all of Georgia football in general, that if you have been more explosive than people realize, then maybe something about the way that you show yourself, present yourself, could help tell a better story on that. Because if you don't tell your story the way you want to, other people are going to try to tell that story for you, including reporters who I don't think are ill-intended necessarily, who want to say, oh, you're the outlier, you're the team that's about 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and let's play defense, and let's win 10-7. If you don't tell your own story, other people are going to tell a story for you, and you're probably not going to like that quite as much. Same thing when it comes to the wide receiver position. Now, if you want to go and look, and I don't have the numbers in front of me just because small details sometimes are not my strength, but if you want to look at the number of receivers that Georgia's had drafted in like this half-decade, Kirby Smart era, I think you'd be pretty surprised overall where Georgia ranks among college programs in terms of putting receivers into the NFL. They have actually put a lot of guys at that position in the league. But nonetheless, the narrative, the storyline persists of, well, Georgia just has problems at the receiver position. This is thought of as a long-term issue for UGA. It's also thought of a near-term issue for Georgia because you don't have to look very far. In fact, most of us would probably feel the same way, that one of the less certain things for us about the Georgia roster here this season is what is going on at the receiver position. And this was also a moment last week at SEC Media Days where there was a little bit of, tension's a strong word to use, but certainly a little bit of back and forth between Kirby and some of the reporters about, hey, do you got the receiver talent you need to have the success that you want to have? At least one media man named Steve apparently didn't think so. This is also from last week.
I'm just very thankful for people like you, Steve, that keep questioning them, because the more you question them, the more it helps me motivate them. So everybody says that we don't listen to you guys. Well, the wide receivers are listening, so they'll have a new challenge issued based on your question.
I mean, heck, I kind of hope they are listening. And I like these guys. I think a lot of them have a chance to be really good. But the truth is, look, the average Georgia fan is sick to death of media people, even if they're not like bad intentions or trolling or whatever else, even if it's just good-natured takes. A lot of Georgia fans are sick to death of media people feeling like they can bash Georgia as the outlier team that wants to run the ball and play defense, that doesn't cultivate wide receiver talent, that's not explosive on offense. And even if the facts don't support that negative appraisal of Georgia, it persists because of you call it the PR game or whatever you want to do. It's just one of those things that persists. So a lot of Georgia fans want to see that chatter come to an end. And so if Kirby tells Steve, and I don't even really know who Steve is, but if Kirby tells Steve, hey, Steve, I'm glad you're out there because now you're firing up our receivers. Well, gosh, I hope that's the case. I hope these guys really are let me try to speak English. I hope these guys are ready to go out there and shut up the critics. And frankly, I hope the Georgia coaching staff feels the same way. You got to get sick of this after a while of people asking the same old questions, doing the same old stuff, and treating you as if you're the same old program, no matter what facts you think you have in support of your point of view. The negative appraisal of Georgia offensively seems to continue. Even though the media voted Georgia win the SEC, it certainly sounds like, based on this line of questioning, the media thinks that Georgia will win the SEC, playing as if it was still, what was it, Brett Bielema said the other day, 2005, an older version of this league than the very modern version some people think they see right now. And a lot of this gets laid at the feet of Mike Bobo too. And gosh knows that's not a new thing. That's been going on for a while. And once again, in contrast to the fact that Georgia was picked to win the league, there was almost a moment when it felt like Kirby Smart was put on the witness stand at SEC Media Days because of his offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo. Now, I think some of this was related to the fact that Drew Bobo came to Media Days. I think there were more Mike Bobo questions because Drew Bobo is one of the players that Georgia selected. I just think it gave people a permission structure to bring that that storyline out. But either way, Drew's a fine representative of Georgia. We weren't upset that he was there. But it did create, I think, more questions about the offensive coordinator, including at the very end of Kirby's main podium presser the other day. Kirby once again forced to defend what he thinks he has when it comes to his overall coaching staff, and Mike Bobo in particular. Let me let you hear that.
I don't think that's my decision. I look at things through facts, and I look at things through what I see with my own two eyes. I was blessed to work for the greatest college football coach in the history of all of college football, and I don't even think it's arguable. I don't think you can even debate it. But I learned from him that you evaluate things from inside out. And I do think football intuition is one of my strengths. And knowing that, I know we got the right offensive coordinator. What you guys want to write and talk about is completely up to you, because I look at the production he's had, the success he's had, the team success where he doesn't worry about stats. He worries about winning football games. And the way he coaches our players day to day is unmatched in this country.
Okay, so before we move on, can we at least agree with just the small basic premise that it's a little bit weird that the team that got picked to win the SEC had the coach not fighting with the media, but certainly going back and forth with the media as much as you just heard right there about the nature of the offense and who's in control of that offense and how come you don't have any wide receivers. I mean, that's a lot of tension for a team that's predicted to win the SEC for a third straight year. That's a little bit weird to me, and I'm just going to leave it at that. It just seems a bit strange. But let's spin it forward a bit, and let's talk about how do you shut all these guys up, and how do you answer all these questions once and for all, and give the naysayers and the critics, or just the observers, give them the offensive performance they say they want to see from Georgia, and provide to Georgia fans the offense they say they want to see from Georgia. Well, this is where you start looking up and down the roster of what you have on offense, and you definitely notice that one position group just seems to be jam-packed, loaded with talent. And this is a simple idea, but sometimes there is a lot of truth in simplicity. It is certainly a belief of us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, that the best version of Georgia offensively this year, the one that scores the most points, the one that creates the most explosive plays, both explosive runs and the explosive pass plays, means you got to try to find a way to get as much out of your tight ends as possible. Maybe the questions about wide receiver are unfair, maybe they're not, but if you want to call them pass catchers and supplement that wide receiver group, as unproven as it might be, with this group of tight ends, suddenly you feel a little bit better about that. And if you're saying, well, Georgia's the outlier and they're doing things, from a more simple bygone era offensively, you let this team get real creative with the number of tight ends it has in the field, how it lines them up, what it does with them. That gets shut up too. And it'd be a great way for Mike Bobo, and I think if this works out, he deserves a chance to do it, to just spike the football on everybody. If suddenly he's dialing up these really diabolical things with the tight end position, all of a sudden you're just shutting everybody up, and a lot of Georgia fans would love to see that happen. A guy that also said this with us last week, and this is obviously no surprise, the terrific former Georgia tight end Ben Watson, who we really like, working for the SEC Network, also just a big fan of his alma mater. This is one of the things, and when you hear this clip, he's going to say it multiple times. It is imperative. It is just an absolute requisite. You have got to make the tight ends a big part of what you want to do offensively. You want to shut up these critics who are saying whatever about what you're not offensively. Use these tight ends to the heavy dosage that they probably deserve, and all of that has a chance to go away. I thought Ben Watson was great when he said this recently on our show.
The tight end group has to be an integral part of this offense.
Yeah.
Like, if we're sitting here in December, or next year we're actually sitting here, or in Nashville, wherever SEC Media Days is, and we're talking about Georgia being successful, it's going to be on offense. It's going to be because the tight ends play well. And I'm not just talking about 6'7" Elias catching passes in the red zone,
right,
although that's very important. I'm not just talking about the incredible play action passes and design plays that Lawson Lucky got last year. A lot of his touchdowns were designed by Coach Bobo in order to get him open, which I love. But I'm talking about how they play in the run game. Like, our tight ends, Coach Smart said it, Georgia's best when they are a physical, run-first defense football team. That's how we've always played. The tight ends have to be an integral part of that.
So that's Ben Watson. And let me give you a brief aside just for a moment. It is interesting. Now, Ben's kind of an insider because he played at Georgia, but a lot of the media types outside the bubble of DawgNation, when they talk Georgia tight ends, they do mention Elias Williams a lot. And obviously, how could you not? The body type is just awe-inspiring when you see it. But I wonder if you talk to people in our bubble here with DawgNation, people who truly are very close to the program, I wonder where they would rank Elias Williams in terms of the impact that he's going to make statistically here this season. I've said over and over again, I think that Lawson Lucky may be the most underrated player on this team. I think he has a chance to have a very big year. And if I'm true about that and right about that, then when you look for that second tight end at Georgia, I guess, assuming you think that Caden Prothro is a wide receiver, I guess now you're looking at what about Ethan Barbour, who was injured for some last year? What about Elias Williams, making that comparison between those two? I'm also a big believer. I think that Jaden Riddell is going to be on the field for Georgia here too. So a lot of people who maybe don't live in the Georgia world every single day, Elias Williams is like the first name they bring up because he's the guy that just looks like, kind of reminds you of just the Darnell Washington style of, oh my gosh, can you see that guy getting off a bus? But I wonder if people actually close to Georgia have Elias ranked, as the, at the top of the tight end pecking order. They might, and we'll learn more about that in fall camp. I just wonder about that. But either way, that's Ben Watson talking about what these tight ends can do this year, and then saying this, in addition to the way in which they can be explosive, catching the ball and help Georgia further its efforts with its passing game, they also have a chance attached to the line of scrimmage, blocking for running plays, to unlock that part of the Georgia offense too. Let you hear Ben Watson again.
And what I love about our group is that you've got guys who can be people movers. You've got guys who are strong at the point of attack. You have guys who are willing to block because they understand that we've got a bevy of running backs and we've got an offensive line that can be really good. And so they have to hold up their end of the bargain on the end of the line of scrimmage. I mean, I think about a team like Oklahoma was pretty horrendous running the football last year, was good in a lot of other areas. They thought it was so important to get the run game going that they go out and hire Jason Witten to go coach their tight ends, because the tight end has to be integral when it comes to running the football so that you can build the play action. And so the tight end group is not just going to make highlights at Georgia, although they can do that. This tight end group is going to have to be an intricate part of the run game in 12 personnel, 11 personnel, whatever it may be.
What he says about Witten going to Oklahoma also reminds me of after the 2024 season, John Lilly coming back to Georgia. When they wanted to upgrade the running game, they bring in Phil Rauschers, now the offensive line coach. They bring in Lilly, who's obviously got a long history at Georgia, and you would assume that was also part of that too, that if you want to unlock your running game, the extra block for the tight end or a couple of extra blockers, when you have those two tight end sets, that goes a long way towards it. Now, we know in the era of Brock Bowers that Georgia tight ends can be dynamic pass-catching threats, and this year I hope that group is. They certainly need to have more pass-catching success than they probably did a year ago, but they also have a chance to aid those explosive runs too. So let's close it out by saying this. This may be the most important position group for Georgia on offense. I'm talking about the tight end position. If this is going to be a great offense, you probably need to get the highest and best possible use out of your deepest position. And the deepest position group on this entire roster may be the tight ends. So many interesting body types, so much athleticism, so much potential for physicality, and how they're used is going to give Mike Bobo a chance to say, all you folks who didn't think I knew what I was doing, look at how I used this group. Look at how we created both explosive runs and explosive pass plays. And for everybody who thinks the Georgia offense hasn't been good enough, this group could lead the way in towards vanquishing that critics, people who've been saying those kinds of things. And wouldn't that be a fun thing to consider as we head towards the fall? My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Good to have you with us. However you get to us, we're live on video today, 10 a.m. We're on the radio at noon every single day, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast wherever you find them, Apple, Spotify, worldfamousDawgNation.com. A lot of places to catch up on the show. We're just glad that one of these platforms, video, audio, radio, whatever, we're just glad you found a way to connect with us because we love being for you here each and every day. And speaking of somebody else who shows up for the community every day, that's our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. Now, I know, and I've been saying this now for years. Look, divorce is just not a good, fun thing to talk about. It's not the kind of thing I'd really wish on anybody. There's a tough story behind every divorce. And even, many, many years later, you can sometimes still think back on it and say, boy, I wish that hadn't happened, or whatever the origin for you is on that. That's a weighty memory. I don't deny that at all. I also am a big believer in this, that whatever's true is what has to be dealt with. And that's your reality if you've tried to save your marriage and you've discovered it's not going to happen, or if the other party has made that decision. Well, our friends at Merriweather and Tharp are there for you. If you've got questions about the divorce process, they've got answers. Let me give you one particular idea that is going to probably come up for you, because we know this is a legal process. Legal processes can be ongoing for a period of time, and I'm sure if you're like many people considering this as a next step for you, one of your concerns might be, at least that's what I've been told by my friends at Merriweather and Tharp, Bob and the entire team there who've helped people in this situation, is that a common question that comes up is, how much is this going to cost? And at what point do I have some cost certainty that this is the cost? Because sometimes the ongoing process can create some anxiety as it relates to that. Well, this is where our friends at Merriweather and Tharp have gotten very modern, very creative to create, some levels of service for you that can offer like a flat fee or a monthly subscription, the kind of thing that just allows you to know, okay, well, this is what the end price is going to be to get through this situation and get me onto what everybody wants in a scenario like this, which is just a happier, more enjoyable next season of your life. Whatever you're going through now, sometimes it just is what it is. But what about the future? How do we make the future better? That's what Merriweather and Tharp wants to do for you. So if you feel like this might be a next step, find out what your scenario really looks like as it relates to the law and the very, very substantial issues that are impacted by your divorce decision, such as your relationship with your kids, your finances, and everything like that. Our friends can tell you more about it online, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. That is GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Merriweather and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. Okay, before we move on, let me give you a couple of programming notes here just for a second. So we have a couple of really cool things coming up that I'll be telling you about in the days to come. But how this impacts us in the near term is we've got a couple of extra video projects that we're doing around here over the course of the next couple of days. What that means is that tomorrow's show, DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, will be pre-recorded. We're pre-recording it today to air tomorrow. So not going to be any kind of change in the news cycle, we don't believe. We'll be doing it late enough in the afternoon that it'll feel fresh. But we are pre-recording that today to air tomorrow for our friends in our live chat as a part of our R.S. Andrews Cooldown. I guess we'll miss you for that. But otherwise, it should be about the same. We're also going to have to do the same thing on Monday. And I have, unfortunately, for our folks, dragging some of our staff, including our friend Jay Black, to come in here on Sunday. So we're going to record the Monday show on Sunday. So We've got 2 pre-recorded shows coming up, but they're going to be pre-recorded essentially only a few hours ahead of time. And the reason why is, as we like to say in the business, we're going to be on assignment. We got a couple of cool video things that we're doing that we're going to tell you all about, but we're recording those tomorrow and Monday. So we're going to be on assignment, pre-recorded for both Friday and Monday, but they're going to be outstanding shows. I think you're going to really like it, and most of you listen on demand anyway. You may never really know the difference, but we always like to, just not pull the wool over your eyes, let you know when our broadcast delivery is a little bit different, especially as it impacts our friends in the live chat. Also, as I told you, we got Jeff Sentell here coming up in a moment. That's going to be a lot of fun. And as a lead-in with Jeff Sentell, not normally with us on a Thursday, but we wanted to catch up with him today just simply because you could have big news coming for Georgia tomorrow. Let's preview some of that as it relates to around the doghouse here today. The possibility that Georgia could be on commit watch for a really good-looking defensive back prospect, Seth Williams. You've heard us talk about him before. It is a Georgia-Clemson battle. A lot of those battles for the 2027 class thus far have gone Clemson's way. There is, I think, some optimism that this time is going to be different. Part of that for Williams is he was originally slated to commit near the beginning of the month. That got pushed back, and I think the timeline change here, smart folks, including, I believe, Jeff Sentell, when he joins us in a moment, will say the postponement of that timeline, the extension of the recruiting decision process for Williams, perhaps probably works out to Georgia's benefit. I also like this. In old school fashion, the quarterback commit for Georgia, giving a shout out to Seth Williams, saying, "Come home, Seth Williams." That's Colton Nussmeier, who, by the way, still, I guess, looking for a place to play for his senior season. We may also need to ask Jeff Sentell about that coming up in a moment. But either way, Nussmeier, the Georgia commit, encouraging Seth Williams to join him at Georgia, and maybe that's what we'll hear tomorrow from Williams. I want you to check out last night's edition of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Jeff Sentell, Kaylee Manziel, right off the top of the show, Jeff fresh off vacation, right off the top of the show, they got right into the Seth Williams situation and what might happen here, and I thought this was great, getting a chance to hear from Seth Williams in his own right. So a lot of analysis from Jeff and Kaylee, also a chance to hear from Seth Williams. In fact, let me give you a taste of some of this, including after the postponement of the original announcement, why Seth Williams wants to make his decision tomorrow. This is the man of the hour, Seth Williams.
The 31st, is that a reason? Mom's birthday, dad's birthday, any specific reason?
Nah, I just didn't want to go into August worrying about having to commit during football season. I didn't want that attention to be on my teammates, that attention to really stop me and separate me from the team, because at the end of the day, it's all about football, It's always going to be about football. And it was just simple, like, where would I go and thrive the most? Where would I go and be the best player I could be? Where would I go and be coached the hardest? A lot of kids don't like to get coached hard, but me, I feel like that's what you need to be a great player. I got coached hard here. A lot of people might not know that, but I got coached hard here, and I feel like if I get coached hard somewhere else, this will be me at the next level.
So it's really interesting to hear him talk about wanting to be coached hard and liking that about what Georgia has to offer, and goodness knows that in this day and age, you want guys who are capable of self-selecting. Georgia is not for everybody. Now, it can be the most beneficial and valuable decision anyone can make, but you got to want it. You got to love football. You got to love guys who also love football and the natural intensity that comes with some of that. And it sounds like Seth Williams sees himself as one of those guys. It's also interesting if you're watching on video, we got skull cap or whatever he's got on his head there, is, I guess, Clemson branded. We're big believers for the most part that apparel's pretty misleading. Y'all remember Owen Popo, who committed obviously to Auburn, went on to have a career at Auburn coming out of Grayson High School. The week before he made that pledge, I think we saw photos of this, he was going around wearing Georgia gear all over the place. So that's maybe like one of many examples of oftentimes apparel ends up being pretty misleading. Now, listen, Seth Williams may choose Clemson. I don't dispute that he might. He certainly might. But I don't know that I put a lot of emphasis on the cap that Williams is necessarily wearing there in terms of, the decision that he might make. So as far as what that decision will be, Williams also told our Jeff Sentell about his own internal process on this and, when it is that he knew now is the time. And I guess in those final moments, the level of peace he has with the decision he's ultimately going to make. Let's hear Seth Williams again.
When were you comfortable with your decision? When did that happen?
Really just praying, praying did a lot for me in this situation. It was just like, how am I going to come into this week knowing that I got to commit, or the week before knowing that I'm committing soon? I set my date, and it was just like, hey, I'm not pushing it back no more. It's not going to be after July or after August, because, you know, that's just football time. You know, that's what got me here. So I really just wanted to, you know, take the time and really spend it with my teammates, and, you know, yeah.
When did you come to the decision? How long have you known?
Probably like a week and a half now. You know, just really sitting down and making decisions with my family, talking to my dad, talking to my mom, letting everybody know how I felt about it, them letting me know how they feel about it, and just like, you know, making the best decisions for myself.
I will say this. I think that, and it's probably even more true now than ever, whether a guy chooses Georgia or not, and we've certainly talked about plenty of guys over the course of years who both have and haven't decided to come to Georgia. You don't win them all. But I never stop having a certain level of sympathy for how hard the decision must be, because, you know, obviously we know that Georgia has a lot to offer. We would certainly acknowledge that Clemson has plenty to offer as well. Good program. We respect Dabo Swinney. They have plenty to sell too. I mean, can you imagine trying to sift through these offers? And in the case of Kirby versus Dabo, I think they're both probably pretty straightforward of, hey, here's what it's going to be like here. This is what we're offering you. I don't believe either of those two coaches are necessarily the kind that just say whatever it takes to win the recruitment. I really don't think that about either Kirby or Dabo, to be honest with you. But plenty of coaches are. Can you imagine how just difficult making that decision might be for some people, where everybody's telling you exactly what you want to hear? You've got to try to decide what's real and what's believable. You know, I mean, I have a hard time sometimes deciding which restaurant I want to eat at. Can you imagine trying to decide where do I want to spend the next 3 to 4 years of my life, maybe even longer than that, and setting me up for success for the next few decades of my life? Big, tough decision. I can only imagine how challenging that must be, but it sounds like Seth Williams has made peace with that. And speaking of the difficulty of it, we'll give you one more from Seth Williams here, just talking about how difficult it actually was to arrive at the decision it sounds like he's made. Let's let you hear Seth Williams again.
How hard was this? Can you put it into words?
It was extremely hard. You know, it was just one of those situations where it's just like, at the end of the day, I got to make a decision for myself and the best for my future.
When you finally figured it out, was it relief?
You know, it's always going to be a relief when you go through a situation like this, a moment like this, and you know you have the right decision, because it's a bunch of anxiety building up to this point. You know, it's just a lot to think about. You know, a lot to make decisions with your family. You know, and think about what could happen if I go to this school. What could happen if I go to this school? So it really just like, once you find that confirmation that you know where you want to go, everything just settles down.
We almost got a little Tom Rinaldi from Jeff there at the end. Did you notice that? Did you hear how the octave changed a bit? Got a little breathier when he said, "When you finally figured it out, was it relief?" I mean, that's a very professorial and certainly hard, just intense way to ask that question. Very Tom Rinaldi-esque from Jeff Sentell on that. That is a lot of fun, and certainly revealing information from Seth Williams, who will make his decision tomorrow. And we are certainly hopeful that is the Georgia Bulldogs. In fact, we'll talk to Jeff Sentell about that in just a moment. But for now, let me call that around the doghouse here today on DawgNation Daily. And before I jump to Jeff, can I give a shout out here just for a second to our friends at Mercier Orchards Hard Cider? After great questions like that and a great interview, I probably owe Jeff a beverage, and a great beverage for us to share together would be the wonderful taste of Mercier Orchards Hard Cider, especially during summer. Look, this is that time, and I'm talking about for hundreds and hundreds of years. In Georgia, it's almost harvest season, right? It's almost time to start, picking fruits and all the other great things that are growing here in our state. And for our friends at Mercier Orchards, that means taking the apples and the blueberries and all the things they've grown and blending them together and making the delicious flavors that they're famous for when it comes to Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. Now, sometimes when we talk about that, we're talking about the Blackberry Bramble or the Just Peachy or any of those options. But for right now, we're also specifically telling you about the flavor available only for a limited time, known as Out of the Blue. It's the apples and the blueberries blended together. Gives you a semi-sweet flavor palette on this, which I think is delicious, and it's a lot of fun. It's worth going up to Blue Ridge to experience for yourself. You can enjoy it on tap, and for the first time ever this year, you can also bring it home in cans as well, but only for a limited time. So find out more online. It's mercier-orchards.com/hard-cider. It's also something that can be pretty easily searched. Just look at Mercier. It's spelled M-E-R-C-I-E-R. M-E-R-C-I-E-R. Mercier Orchards Hard Cider. Make sure you check it out today. Okay, Before we're done, we're going to laugh at Jon Sumrall once again because he, as of late, is the gift that keeps on giving. And I'm also going to tell you why I believe maybe the most important question related to Georgia football of them all at the moment has very little to do with Kirby Smart. That's all on the way. But for now, Commitment Watch tomorrow, recent additions to the 2027 class, our first chance to talk to this man in a long time, normally a Friday, fun today on a Thursday. It's Jeff Sentell here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
You know, Jeff, over the course, first of all, welcome back. It's great to have you here after what sounds like a wonderful vacation for you and your family in Japan. You were kind enough to tell us before you left that's where y'all were going, and had a chance to talk to you briefly about this off the air. And just amazing trip. Cool to be able to experience this with your kids as they get a little older. Y'all do a lot of interesting things, and this was certainly one of those. So we're happy to have you back here. And I'll just pause on that for a moment. Jeff, welcome back stateside, and good to be talking with you once again.
Brandon, feels great to be back on the air. The season is almost right upon us, and we just jumped right in it despite some severe Japanese jet lag from Asia.
Yeah.
I think I've already talked to 7, 8 UGA commitments since I've been back, and that's in a matter of days.
Well, that's really interesting. Of course, maybe the most important name of all, and we just heard some great interview questions you asked to Seth Williams. There's always going to be in every recruiting cycle one of these recruiting battles that probably ends up punching above its weight class a bit. This may be one of those for a couple of reasons. A, Georgia really needs more defensive backs in this class. B, it's probably looking for a measure of revenge against Clemson after a couple of decisions in this cycle went the way of the Tigers. You know, it's also one of those things where I think Georgia fans are just hungry for whatever big recruiting win they can get. To me, Seth Williams would rank as that. He's going to decide. We're talking on a Thursday. He's going to decide tomorrow. Seems like Georgia might be in an okay spot on this, but I think this would be a very big win if Georgia is able to get it.
Brandon, that's kind of the way to chop it up. I said on Before the Hedges last night that I felt that if Seth would have made his decision on July 3rd, as he isn't originally kind of plotted out, I think that decision would have been the Tigers. But this has gotten really tight, really late over the last, 2 or 3 weeks. Seth has his decision. He's tucked it away in his back pocket, and he will reveal it tomorrow. Brandon, he's going to reveal it at his auntie's house. How do you feel about a decision reveal at your auntie's house, man? How do you feel about that one?
Listen, any kind of family tie I'm always in favor of. That feels like good and wholesome stuff. So 100% in favor of all that. Sounds like the kind of player I'd probably like. And speaking of him as a player, what can you tell us more about his personality on the field?
Well, first of all, if you look at his film, Brandon, the best highlights, we must honestly say, his best highlights are as a receiver. He's catching balls all over the place. You kind of see some of those ball skills that he has. Of course, right here you see him make a pick six. And Brandon, this is a legit 6'3" guy. He's 185 pounds. He plays both ways for Lakeside High. Really rare opportunity to go see a player at Lakeside High. I mean, I've been around the DawgNation beat for more than 10, 11 years now, and it's the first time I've ever been to Lakeside High. Seth is one of their best. And, I was talking to head coach Maurice Starr about him, and it's very interesting because you look at him on film and you're trying to gauge, just like any Georgia coach would, how fast is he? Is he a long strider, one of those guys that can cover 5 yards in 2 steps? So it seems like he's moving faster than maybe the eye compels you to admit. But here's the thing. Starr told me is like, listen, no, man, he's a 4.5 guy every day of the week. And sometimes he can dip in there and get to a 4.4 level in the 40. But when you watch him try to explode on a ball and make a move, a quick move, he said he has that rare twitch ability. He called it 4.3 twitch or 4.3 explosiveness right there. And I'll tell you a little bit more here from the reporter's notebook.
Okay.
Yes, Clemson fans have reveled in the fact that I think the new term, Brandon, is called stuffing him in a locker, that Dabo has kind of had his way with Kirby Smart on the trail over the past 8 months or so. I think there's about 4 or 5 recruiting battles that you could say that Georgia has gone head-to-head with for Clemson, that Clemson has won. This one will be interesting, Brandon, because I do think some of those Georgia really, really like the kid, but I don't know if they were playing to win the recruitment. I felt for the last month now that Georgia was wanting to play to win this recruitment. Brandon, he's now one of the top 247 players in the country for 24/7 Sports.
Yeah.
I believe he's now the number 19 player in Georgia. And I can go back to months ago, Seth Williams telling me that a Georgia coach was talking to him, sometimes multiple coaches, every day of the week. And that was Nichols coach Andrew Thacker. That was DB's coach Tavares Robinson. It was sometimes Dante Williams. It was sometimes Kirby Smart. So Georgia feels like they're invested trying to win this recruitment and this battle with Clemson.
And to go back to what you said a moment ago about seeing more highlights on offense than defense, I tell you that reminds me of, maybe among others, but certainly top of mind for me, is Keely Ringo. And I'm not saying that Williams is going to be what Keely Ringo was, but I remember when we were talking about Keely Ringo as a recruit, far before he became the punctuation mark on Kirby Smart's first national championship, when we look at those highlights from out of Arizona, he was always stuff he was doing offensively. And sometimes to me, the elite prospect, because look, if you're Keely lining up as a defensive back, no one's throwing your direction. If you want to make the highlight play, you're going to probably have to do it on offense. I feel the same way about line, where it's like, a guy like Zakai Helton, who may start at right guard for Georgia. We were all enamored with what he was doing as a defensive lineman in high school. It's just an interesting way to see more of his athleticism. So if Seth Williams is, better highlights on offense as a high school guy than defense, then to me, he fits in with some of the recent good names that Georgia's probably added.
Yeah, they've really, speaking of good names, Brandon, they've really tried to surround him with optimal examples of Georgia football. I mean, when he took his official visit, it was Blake Stewart, the talented safety, very savvy, intelligent young man out of Woodward Academy. And
another guy that Georgia took from Clemson, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. I know Brandon keeps that ledger. You gotta tally somewhere on all these things.
You better believe it.
They just wanted to expose him to Georgia. They brought up the name Malachi Starks, and Brandon, recent short-term history. I know you have a program that covers this every day, but you look at Lewis Cine, first rounder. You look at Malachi Starks, first rounder. You look at KJ Bolden. All the mock drafts now have him as a first rounder anyway, and so there's a pretty good pedigree. You throw in Chris Smith as well, who's you've seen him recently commenting on some of Seth Williams' Instagram stories and posts and everything else like that. How about a blast from the past with Chris Smith, the second, Brandon, encouraging Seth Williams to make the right decision tomorrow?
I love that. Chris is always one of our favorite guys, so that is a lot of fun. Let me also, in the time we have, make mention of a couple of other recent Georgia commits, guys that I don't think we really talked about with you post-commitment just because of our schedules being slightly different as of late. Speaking of defensive backs, Georgia also recently added Adrian Cole out of Douglas County. That's a program we like. Johnny White's a coach we have a ton of respect for. That's a loaded roster, so he's playing with good guys, obviously on the practice field every single day and facing top competition every single Friday night too. So hoping to get Williams tomorrow, but for the defensive back who is in the mix, Adrian Cole, let's talk about him now that he's officially a Georgia commitment.
Well, Brandon, this is a player parallel. I know you love him. How about a Ty Boogie Green parallel? That's who Coach White tells me that he wants him to be. And congratulations to Ty Boogie, because his on-field example has now called it the Ty Boogie position. And that's what that means is the guy's going to play safety. The guy's going to maybe even sometimes rush the passer. The guy's going to run the football on the other side of the ball at running back. He's going to return kicks. He's going to catch some passes. They're going to try to have Adrian touch the ball in as many ways as possible. Brandon, this is an interchangeable DB, kind of one of those Swiss Army knife. Coach White tells me that, heck, man, he could go play some corner, kind of like what Ty Boogie did in the spring game at Georgia if we needed him to. And he's one of those special players. And Brandon, the common thread between both of these recent commitments is these are guys, and I still think it matters in this paycheck player era. These are guys, when they were young kids, they had the Georgia poster, they had the Georgia jersey, they were watching the Dogs all the time on TV, and it was like Georgia versus Alabama in the Super Bowl every time those two teams played about 4 or 5 years ago. They grew up wanting to be Dogs. The Dogs wanted them, and then they sealed the deal with these commitments.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I remember I read this at DawgNation.com, I believe, your comparison to, Tyreek Green. Listen, that's no small thing for me because we think of Buford as being this super loaded team, and obviously it is every year. It certainly wasn't a state championship year last year, but I thought that Green was Buford's best player. I thought he was one of the more dynamic players in the state overall, scoring touchdowns a multitude of ways. So if we're saying Green and Cole in the same sentence, that's a huge recommendation for Adrian as a player.
Well, Brendan, if you go and take one DB so far, and Georgia only has 7 defensive commitments, which is still so very rare to say right now. It feels like I got to double check my math every time I go. Only 7 commitments, only 1 defensive back. Well, you've got a guy that has the versatility to play all over the field. And again, let's say this one other thing he has in common with a Buford High player. Brandon, Douglas County has played the teams. They have been in the slobber knockers. They've not backed away from anybody with their non-region schedule or their preseason jamboree schedules or whatever. So you've got Cole, who originally started his high school career at Pace Academy, a school that's been very good to the Georgia Bulldogs on their recruiting efforts over the years. You've got a kid named Cole who can kind of do a lot. He can be that nickel safety. He can be a spot corner, but he could definitely play either one of those safety positions, the free safety or the strong safety. He's very physical. He's very violent in the box. And Georgia was able to hold off like LSU, Ole Miss, other schools right there for Adrian Cole.
All right, so let's talk about another Georgia commit as of late, and I saw him briefly yesterday. We had our Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic kickoff lunch, and Miller Westerfield was there out of Roswell. Didn't get a chance to speak to him personally. I'm sure you did, but this is an interesting add to this Georgia class, too. What's Georgia getting when it comes to Westerfield?
Brandon, I can't help but mention this because I have so many dear friends that the slogan means something. I guess it's Miller time for Georgia on the offensive line, and this is a very.
Are you able to say that for a guy that's not 21 yet? Can you say Miller time?
I think so, Brandon. Come on, you run a fun show here. I'm sure.
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
There's many tailgaters that are really affiliated that watch your program that are very affiliated with that Miller time slogan. Probably.
Yeah, I don't doubt that for sure. I don't doubt that at all.
Let's say Miller time is something different, though. Let's keep it a little PG for the Disney crowd. Miller time was when he got up to they went on a family retreat. They go there every year. It's in the mountains of North Carolina, and he's on a screened-in porch, Miller and his mother, Katie. I believe he just watched the movie To Kill an Irishman, and they're just sitting on the porch and just thinking about it. And Miller's a guy that you can kind of find him around all the neighborhood ponds in Roswell fishing, man. He loves to throw a line in the water. He loves to kick back and take it easy. Well, they were sitting there in North Carolina in their retreat, Brandon. This is like generator area of North Carolina, like no real power lines, no Wi-Fi, no cell service or whatever. And they just started thinking about it. Solid offer from Georgia, an even more generous offer from LSU, and they started thinking about it. LSU said, you could play all across the front. You could play center, guard, tackle. And he just kept thinking about it. He's like, man, that's 9 hours. That's 9 hours away from like extended family, grandma, grandpa, uncles, mom, dad, family, all that. And he's like, that's just too far, especially when it's Georgia. He said it was always going to be Georgia. Like I remember time stamping some things. I said, Miller, when I spoke to you way back when, he said, was that offer committable? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, was it going to be Georgia then? And he's like, yeah. He's like, man, it's just always going to be Georgia with me.
Well, that's the kind of guy I like. And so I certainly wish him well as he gets ready to begin that Georgia career. You love having guys that feel that committed to the decision they get a chance to make. That's awesome stuff. In the time we have left, I've asked you this a million times, but I'm fascinated by this story. Are we any closer to knowing where Colton Nussmeier is going to play his high school football for the upcoming season? Obviously ruled ineligible in Texas because of some transfer stuff. We assume he's going to play somewhere. Do we have more information on that?
Brett, this is going to sound like a soap opera to you, but according to what I'm hearing right now with Colton, it's not go play in New Orleans where his dad is the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. Of course, he could play in district or he could play at a private school in the New Orleans parochial area, I guess. And then it doesn't seem like it's going to be a move to Georgia early. The weird contender here, Brandon, is according to what I'm hearing, the chance continues to grow by the day that he goes back to his original school where he attempted to transfer out of to Denton Ryan. And it's almost like, hate to say this, but so many people are going to get this when they say this. It's almost like the Texas, the UIL is what it's called. The Texas governing body played a reverse Uno card on this transfer, and maybe he might have to go back to where he played at his junior season, where he was attempting to transfer from, to potentially have that senior year. That, man, I sure hope he gets it, man. Senior years are special, man. And no matter what happens with all this transferring world, when a guy doesn't get the chance to play his senior year of high school ball, man, you lose a whole photo book worth of memories there, man.
And what's weird about that is, and maybe it's the only decision he has, but boy, it's got to feel like that's a pretty tense situation. A, Nussmeier didn't want to be there, so the team's got to feel weird about that. B, Nussmeier's got to feel weird about the fact that it was the program that blocked his attempt, based on your own reporting, blocked his attempt to go somewhere else by saying they felt like it was a competition-based transfer decision and not some sort of, hardship or whatever else. So they really blocked his attempt to go somewhere else. That is a very interesting relationship to try to massage if he were to go back, because you got to imagine there is just bad blood on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe the only other way to embellish this story is, what if he transferred to the crosstown rival or something like that? I mean, that would get some good Texas-sized plot lines going right there. But, Colton's
So
really
it sounds like they just don't want to move. I mean, what it comes down to is whether it be, to be in Louisiana or, somewhere else, they just don't want to move, it sounds like.
It's also, let's acknowledge this, Brandon. It's also pretty hard. I was thinking about this the other day. It's also pretty hard to come in late July and kind of knock
That's
off
true.
the incumbent starter. You got to find a
That's a good
team
point.
that's like, you got to find a team that's like, hey, we're probably just mediocre here at quarterback, and that's what we really need. I mean, you're going to sever some loyalties, and there's going to be if he were to move into a new school and supplant a starter that went through spring practice and 7-on-7s, thinking, this is my time, this is my year, that's also going to be a pretty uncomfortable position too.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that's probably a really good point. Jeff, it's so good to be talking to you about all this stuff again. Glad to have you back from a great vacation. Looking forward to the stretch run for this 2027 recruiting class and some additional ads that could be dropped in here. And, of course, plenty more as we head towards the start of the football season, too. Jeff, welcome back. Thanks for being here. Unusual day for you, but, boy, it worked out great. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Thanks for your time.
Hey, Brandon, any day of the week I could be on with you, I'll be there, man. Appreciate you.
All right, thanks a lot, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Before we do our SEC through, let me just say this. And it does not rise to the level of being worth asking Jeff about yet. We might can bring that music down just slightly. It doesn't rise the level of being worth asking Jeff about yet. Could be a chance that maybe, I don't know, maybe Georgia may still have something big coming. I don't know. And I'm not insider, so don't take that as some sort of whatever. But could be some fun still left to come. We'll see. Let me get ready to shift and do an SEC through here right now. And I want to talk about Ryan Day as it relates to both Georgia and the SEC just for a moment. Big Ten media days going on here right now. And yesterday, one of the things that Ryan Day said was, when he met with, had his time at the podium there in Chicago this week, that he wants to see the, as he calls it, the salary cap for paying players greatly increased. He wants permission, essentially, to pay the players they're trying to bring in on their roster a lot more money. And I don't think you can talk about this without also going back to what we said yesterday, which is Ohio State, along with Notre Dame, just signed an incredibly lucrative jersey patch deal with a big, well-known brand, largest bank in America, JP Morgan Chase. They're going to get, I've heard different sums of money, like $15, $16, $17 million per year on this. In some cases, that dwarfs even what professional sports teams are getting for their jersey patches. Ohio State is really big business. So for a team that's loaded with cash, it's probably not a surprise that Ryan Day wants to see if they can use the financial advantage they already have to create an even bigger edge for themselves. And along those lines, if you want to try to quantify this, The Athletic put out the other day, using valuations of professional sports teams and trying to find comps, who the most valuable college football programs are for 2026. They essentially do this every year. And I don't know if the information The Athletic provides is specifically accurate. I have a suspicion it's probably not. But while it's not specifically accurate, maybe, I do think it's generally directionally accurate, if you get my drift. So this is the top 5, according to The Athletic, of the most valuable programs in college football for 2026. They've got Texas, number 1, valued at $2.46 billion. Ohio State, we just mentioned, they are second at $2.3 billion. Notre Dame comes in third at $2.1 billion. Michigan, an even $2 billion. And then rounding up the top 5, just below the $2 billion club, is Georgia at estimated value, according to The Athletic, of $1.95 billion. So let's talk about the Georgia part of this here for a moment, because this is what I believe is the most important question, maybe, as it relates to Georgia's football future. And I don't think this really has very much to do with Kirby Smart, but because by the time this answer gets decided on, by the time this trend comes to its full fruition, the assumption is Kirby Smart is probably gone. We're talking many years in the future. The question is this: how does Georgia keep pace? And I'm not saying they won't. I'm saying literally, specifically, how does Georgia keep pace with a program like Ohio State that has a lot of money, that wants to use that money, and seems willing to lean into its financial prowess? Let's make a little bit of a comparison here just for a moment. So the state of Ohio is slightly larger than the state of Georgia. 2020 census, I've got Ohio at 11.9 million. Georgia as a state, population as recently as 2020 of 11.3 million. We'll see that changes in a few years, but that's where both these states were in the most recent census. But the big difference between Ohio State and Georgia is their living alumni base. And while most college football fans, believe it or not, are actually not graduates of the school that they cheer for, the majority of them, this is the simplest and easiest way to cultivate a big fan. You bring somebody onto your university campus, you send him through 4 years of school or 5-6 years of school, however long it takes. That guy's a graduate. There's a sense of pride around that lasts for the rest of his life. That has always been the most straightforward way to cultivate a fan base and to cultivate fans. And Ohio State as a university just has a lot more of those than Georgia does. This is a real factor in deciding what the future is going to look like with Georgia and some of the teams that competes with. I've got Ohio State with approximately 600,000 living alumni. Georgia has almost half that, slightly more, but 372,000 living alumni. So there are almost 2 Ohio State grads for every 1 living Georgia grad here right now. And that's size, and that matters. That alumni base to pull from gives Ohio State some prowess. And it's one of those things that could also become even more pronounced in the future. Because if we would say, well, the easiest and best way to cultivate future fans for your program is to bring them on campus, educate them, give them a diploma, and after that, they have the same alumni pride that so many of you have. What's that going to look like for Georgia in the future? Because, once again, to make the comparison between Ohio State and Georgia, Ohio State's acceptance rate for its applications is about 49%. Over the course of time, it's been higher than that. Maybe at one point in time, it was as high as 60%. But it seems like, best guess, it's probably somewhere around 49% acceptance rate right now. We think Georgia's acceptance rate might be as low as 29%. Many of you tell this story. It's actually one of the most common things I hear from people just out and about my life. And I'm talking about, in some cases, very high-powered people, good students, whatever else. They talk all the time about how difficult Georgia is to get into as a school. And so if the simplest way to cultivate your next generation of fans is to bring them on campus, make them students, and eventually turn them into graduates, and Georgia's just turning out, in some cases, fewer of those because they are accepting fewer, than a school like Ohio State is. And frankly, there are a lot of other schools in both the SEC and the Big Ten that have even way higher acceptance rates than that. I'm going to say Indiana, last year's national champion, is somewhere around like 85%. There are SEC schools that have similar numbers. Georgia's just accepting far fewer students here right now. So if you've already got a situation where Ohio State has probably a bigger fan base than you do, and some of that's because they have a much larger alumni base than you do, but you want to keep pace with them financially, where are these fans coming from in the future, long after Kirby Smart's gone, way after all of them? I'm talking about many years in the future. Where are these fans coming from if they don't have much chance of becoming Georgia students and then eventually Georgia grads? Now, listen, I'm not a Georgia grad. There are plenty of non-Georgia grads who are very big Georgia football fans. So some of the people who either don't get accepted to Georgia or don't have even a chance to go to Georgia, so therefore they never apply, some of them will remain Georgia fans. That's obviously true. But not all of them will, because as you know, and you probably have people in your neighborhood or in your life like this, kid doesn't get into Georgia, where do they go? They're going to Auburn, they're going to Ole Miss. Ole Miss has become big in this regard. Alabama's pretty big in this regard. Some of these SEC schools have huge numbers of out-of-state students. And a lot of that's from up north, but some of it's from, big metro area like Atlanta. So for these folks who grew up Georgia fans but didn't get into Georgia, end up going to Auburn, Ole Miss, Alabama, wherever, what do you think they become when they become adults? My guess is they become ticket-buying, donating fans of Auburn, Alabama, Ole Miss, or wherever it is that they go. Now, this is not a catastrophe or a, some sort of, apocalypse for Georgia, but it is something to ask. When you look at the teams the Athletic says are worth more than Georgia, Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Texas, these are well-resourced programs that have a chance to lean on those resources to create even more financial advantages for themselves. And beyond Texas, Georgia is obviously the next most lucrative team in the SEC with a lot more financial advantages than the typical SEC team has, including teams that win a lot, like, say, LSU and Alabama. Georgia even well more resourced, financially speaking, than they are. But maintaining that's not going to be an easy thing to do. And we'll find out how much Georgia gets for its jersey patch on its uniform in comparison to what, like, say, Ohio State and Notre Dame are getting for its. And we'll realize and start to get a little bit of a clearer picture of what the financial landscape really looks like. And making sure you keep pace when it comes to overall valuations and money to spend, some of that's going to be determined on how well you're cultivating the next generation of fans to help support all of this when the current crop of fans age out of their ticket-buying years. And I don't know there's an obvious, easy answer necessarily where all those folks are coming from when it comes to Georgia, just given the current landscape that's out there right now. Worth thinking about. Let me shift to something a little bit maybe funnier to close things out here today. We have had a lot of fun as of late with our new friend Jon Sumrall, the Florida coach. You'll remember we mocked him back at Media Days for the fact that something that Billy Napier had some trouble with while at Florida, constantly vexed by water bottles, had a hard time getting them open. More than one occasion, Napier trying to get the water bottle unscrewed, just not able to do it. A total avatar for his otherwise failed administration while they're at Florida. Trying to get the water bottle open, not able to do it. Multiple cases of that. Well, we saw Jon Sumrall at SEC Media Days the other day. My goodness. He stepped to the podium. Now, we do have evidence that the water bottle was easier to open. It wasn't quite as fast and quite as tightly. But at Media Days, man, he stepped right to the podium. He opened that water bottle just as quick as you could. Very impressive showing overall. But while that may have been a win for Sumrall compared to previous Florida coaches, you'll remember maybe not quite so much of a W when it came to a grandstanding attempt to make himself feel tough in front of a bunch of reporters and, frankly, a weird threat against a reporter whose phone had the temerity to go off during all of this. We felt like this was try hard. We felt like this was a little overdone. You'll remember this from Media Days last week. Let's give you a brief reminder.
November about what it was looking like for both of our schedules of how things were going to unfold. And you'd be kicked out of our team meeting. I swear. Like, you're lucky I'm not going to throw this freaking podium right now. Like, drives me crazy. I would say who is that, but I'm not going to embarrass anybody.
So our guy, the former Georgia basketball coach, Tom Crean, called out Sumrall for that. Sumrall said he was joking, but gosh, it's just not to us a very funny joke. The threat to throw a and we're not scandalized by it, but it just feels really try hard, really just feels fake to me. Feels phony to talk about how tough you are, therefore you're going to throw podiums at reporters because their phone goes off. We thought that was silly. But come to find out, that wasn't the silliest thing to happen for our guy, Jon Sumrall, who has just been a content machine as of late. His wife does a media appearance where she talks about Jon Sumrall's favorite thing to do in the offseason. And this is the kind of thing that's going to stick. This is going to live with Sumrall for quite some time. She's just having fun, but you know how people are. This is what Jon Sumrall's wife said Sumrall likes to do, even during the season, apparently. This from just the other day.
What is something maybe we don't know as seeing head coach Jon Sumrall that you would love Gator Nation to know about him?
He loves pedicures.
Oh, really?
That's his favorite extra thing to do. So every 2 weeks in the football season, Jon loves to get a pedicure. That's just a fun little happy about him.
So we're not going to go against Miss Sumrall on this. We think she's just having fun and just trying to be, give the reporter what she wants to on this. But we also know that she did her husband no favors because this is the kind of thing that people are going to talk about. Now, if you win all your games, that'll eventually be forgotten. But when you start losing, people are going to want to know what color your toenails are painted leading up to the defeat you had. In fact, as we wrap up the show here today and fire up the music, we'll even give a golden shoe as it relates to all of this because this made its way to ESPN the last few days. Dan Orlovsky, the analyst, feels like he's on TV all the time. He was on Get Up the other day, quoted by Awful Announcing as saying, "I am completely against pedicures for dudes. You're a dude. You're not supposed to get pedicures." We totally agree with Dan Orlovsky on this. It's worth pointing out that Jon Sumrall has also fired back at Orlovsky on this too with something related to a woman's shoe. And I honestly don't get that joke. I don't know if that's something. I don't know enough about Dan Orlovsky's origin story to know if that's something related to his past. I don't know that well enough, but people seem to like that. But here's the point, though. You've got, in just the last few days, Sumrall's firing back on Tom Crean, now firing back on Dan Orlovsky. That's a lot of headlines for one coach. And some Florida fans are saying, yeah, he's the new Lane Kiffin. Here's the problem, though. Kiffin still hasn't won anything. And Kiffin has now also realized, maybe I need to get off social media. So the fact that, and he said that last week, so the fact that Sumrall is out here fighting with people on social media, explaining his, proclivity for pedicures, I don't know that's bringing the Gators any closer to winning football games here. So we'll give Dan Orlovsky a golden shoe for a well-placed shot at the new Florida coach, Jon Sumrall. We'll also remind Coach Sumrall that no matter what color his toenails are painted, they got some real trouble coming later on this fall. In fact, Halloween night here in Atlanta, how about 2,091 days? That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is a Gator Hater Updater. Y'all have a good day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cooldown. R.S. Andrews, when you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs, they show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on all of that. All right, we had to be quick with the comments yesterday. We'll give you a good full chat here today, especially given the fact that we'll be on assignment during this portion tomorrow. We'll see if we can give you a full thing here just for a moment. All right, let's see what else is going on. Jan Armistead seems like Jon Sumrall and Florida might be made for each other. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing over multiple coaches. Florida has just been very comfortable with a degree of, whether you want to call it like trash talk or however you want to say it. Florida has been very comfortable with that, whether they backed it up or not. You remember like before the 2017 game against Georgia, you had Chauncey Gardner and all them saying all this crazy stuff, even though Florida was terrible. And Georgia was going to run through Florida. It was always obvious that was going to happen. but Florida was still talking trash and just not backing any of it up. And I swear in the Kirby Smart era since then, it's like every season basically plays out the same way. Florida, knowing it's not going to have a chance to talk after the game, always make sure it gets its shots in before the game, because by the time you get to the final score, the expiration date has arrived. So yes. Marsha Fleming says a lot of younger people don't understand. Some people thought a cell phone in a room. My father would not allow a cell phone in his house. He'd break your phone if it went off in his house. He'd say it's totally disrespectful. He was old school. I was in business world before cell phones. You got fired if your cell phone went off. I get that, but I've also said this. There are plenty of professions that you'd get fired for not having your cell phone. For instance, for my sales folks up us here at DawgNation, hardworking as they are, if they're in some meeting where somebody's talking, I don't want them to have their cell phone turned off, because that could be big deal coming through. So for some professions, I don't want my doctor to have his cell phone go off while I'm in there talking to him. But for salespeople, they better have those phones on all the time. So, I get the idea of, I don't like cell phones, but in the case of, some professions, having access to your cell phone is a very important part of all that. Let's see what else. Miriam Corbin says, I wonder what the conversation was like at the Sumrall house. Yeah, we're not going to pick on Mrs. Sumrall, but I know what you're asking. I think what it probably is, Miriam, and I think you'd agree with me on this, it's the realization, you're not in the American Athletic Conference anymore, that cute little quips about your husband while the Tulane coach don't go very far. Funny little anecdotes while at Florida, that stuff has a tendency to travel. Let's see what else here on Facebook before we check it on YouTube. All right, let me go to YouTube here just for a moment. We'll come back over in just a minute. On YouTube, we'll see how people are doing over there. Randy Hall says, will you be getting Eddie a partner this year for the desk? It's a good idea. You never know what we might do. Eddie could use some companionship at some point in time. Dennis Wilson. Very funny from him. Wyatt says, how was the lunch yesterday? Are you excited for next week with Rusty and Kaylee? What games do you have? I am very excited. Got my schedule now. So I am doing the Wednesday games at Mercedes-Benz Stadium and then the Wednesday and Thursday games the following week. So looking forward to a great collection of games on Wednesday. That's 2 Wednesdays from now at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And then at Cal, we got 2 great games coming, and then we'll be at Blessed Trinity on that Thursday night. So I got 6 games coming up over the course of the next 2 weeks from now. I'll have 6 games over the course of about a week's worth of time. So that's going to be a ton of fun. Can't wait for all of that. Strog Dog says he'd love to see a high school football segment, like maybe once a week. You know what? We've talked about doing some of that kind of stuff too. We may do that this fall. Try to find a good time on the schedule for it. I feel like a Thursday around this time, looking at a game day the next day, might be the right way to do all of that. Let's see what else. James Sansari says Shaq painted his toenails. Do you think anybody gave him any BS about that? I mean, I'd say they probably did. I would say there were probably some chops busted about that, if I had to guess. Jonathan Aaron says, what's one coach in every conference you think is on the hottest seat? All right, let's see if we can do this. I've said this before. I think, believe it or not, as crazy as it might sound, I think the most likely SEC coach to get fired may be Steve Sarkisian. If Texas, with as much talent as it has, even with the schedule it's about to face, if they finish far below expectations, I don't know that Sark can survive that just because, just the pressure is so intense. They are demanding success and giving him whatever he wants to get it. There's a dual edge to that of we're going to give you resources, but you better maximize them. And if he doesn't, I think that Sarkisian's a name worth watching. In the ACC, look, after what happened with Michael Lombardi this week, the Bill Belichick era at North Carolina continues to just be an embarrassment, just a total embarrassment. I don't know how you get anywhere beyond Belichick when it comes to something like that. This has just been a failed just been a failed thing. And I think it was always destined to be that. I predicted last year I didn't even know he'd ever coach a game just because of how silly a lot of this was. And look, this is North Carolina. This is a program that could be something, but they've got to make more serious decisions than this. In the Big Ten, yeah, so Mackenzie reminds us that North Carolina is opening in the season in Ireland, which is a little bit of a trick there as well. One of those international games got canceled, but not the traditional trip to Ireland. The sport does that every single year. Most likely coach in the Big Ten to get fired. Let me see if I can think. There may be an obvious answer to this. It's not coming to me necessarily right now. What happens if things don't work out in Nebraska? I mean, they're spending a bunch of money there too. I think that could get interesting. I mean, you sort of assume that Kirk Ferentz is going to coach at Iowa to as long as he possibly wants to. I don't know that I have. What about Luke Fickell at Wisconsin? Does that seem about right? Fickell at Wisconsin, maybe? Does that seem like a good answer there on that? And the Big 12, I don't know that I have a good answer for that. I'm not sure. I got a good one for that. Tyler Puglisi says, great suit yesterday. I appreciate that. So it's funny. Excuse me. I like to project a casual image here on DawgNation Daily. That's when we have like brick. That's when I have, typically a golf type shirt on. I'm even untucked today, so I'm excessively casual. I have jeans on. So we go for a casual look here for the show because I want it to feel like a relaxed conversation. But generally speaking, I actually like dressing up. And if it wasn't for the intentional aesthetic choice to make this very casual, I'd probably dress up more than I do. I actually like dressing up, so thank you very much. Now, what's always challenging is, I remember Sam Pittman used to talk about this. It's like when you put your coaching pants on for the first time after the offseason, it's like, oh, boy, you better hope these things still fit. I always feel like, because in summertime, you are just wearing less clothes. You're not wearing sport coats, not wearing ties typically. It's a lot of shorts and, loose-fitting stuff because it's hot outside. So when you do go from summer attire to putting some real clothes on for the first time in a while, that's always a bit of a culture shock. So we're trying to get down to our playing weight here before the season starts, but we got a lot of ground to catch up with here. Jake Shimes says, did we intentionally match the suit to the wallpaper yesterday? No, we did not do that, Jay, but thanks for noticing. Good to see you, by the way. Randy Hall says, what type of watch do you have? This is just an old watch. I still just like to wear it. I don't even think this is like a name brand necessarily, anything like that. I do like watches, but this is just kind of an old watch. George on Tap says defense needs to get the ball to the offense, more chances in score position this year. Yeah, I mean, this was the best of Georgia in 2021. Very good offense, statistically speaking, was benefited from a lot of short fields. That if Georgia's doing what we think it can do defensively, I really do believe, to Georgia on Tap's point, that could result in more points scored offensively, because I think, to me, one of the simplest stats that is also pretty telling is average starting field position. Where are you beginning your drives as an offense compared to where the opposing offense is beginning its drives? Boy, that tells you a lot. And, that's just one of those things. You don't have to have an actuarial science degree. You don't have to be some sort of quant. That's just basic counting. Give me average starting field position, and that's, I would say, pretty predictive overall. Let's see what else. Wyatt says, how about picks for state championships? I don't know that I have well-informed picks yet. The honest truth is, I got to get reacquainted with all of the reclassification. I am a long way. Now, I got to get ready to go in a couple of weeks, but I am a long way from making picks right now, I think. Cedric Graham says, Miami fans don't have Google. If they did, they would know that in the ACC, not beat North Carolina the last 5 times they played. Wow. Speaking of that, I gave you those athletic valuations a little earlier. I don't know how serious you take all of these. But in a situation where you've got, a handful of teams worth in excess of $2 billion, Georgia right there at that $2 billion mark, they only have Miami worth $950 million, which I thought was, interesting. Miami's obviously working to change that, but if you take that valuation seriously, they see Miami as just a less valuable entity overall than the others. And when you see how empty Hard Rock Stadium looks on a given Saturday, probably understand why. Randy Hall says Carrollton is loaded. Yeah, I don't doubt that. They are going to be loaded for sure, as they always are. Randy also mentioned the Christian Miller story. Yeah, we're going to do that tomorrow. We haven't had a chance to get to that yet. We've just been very busy, but we are going to do that tomorrow. Bill Camacho says Texas going to go 9-3. Bama's 8-4. I believe that's Miami going 9-3. So no telling which will be on the hot seat or getting fired for that matter. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I will say this. If it does not go well for DeBoer, the fact that he signed a contract extension in the offseason, my prediction is that won't slow Alabama down at all. They will make the decision they feel like they need to make. I don't think they'll be pinned in because of a contract extension if they feel like they need to make a move. Wyatt says BA's rocking the Rolex. No, but I'd like to have one. I am not like a watch guy necessarily. I just like them. I like watch movement. When you have, when you see the gears turning and stuff like that, like a real watch, the smooth second hand, how it just glides across, but also the perpetual motion that works on the inside. It's a cool thing. I mean, I think guys sometimes like those mechanical processes, and it's a cool thing, but I'm not a watch connoisseur. I've known people who are, same way people collect baseball cards and stuff like that. I mean, there are like these, in the old days, there were blogs, message boards. There are watch obsessives. And, the watch obsessive is not necessarily a Rolex guy, usually something in a little bit more avant-garde than that. But I would love to have a Rolex. I really would. A Daytona in particular. That's what I'd like to have. So let's see. Senior Dog 54, not happy with Austin Riley. Yeah, it's been a little tricky for Riley, unfortunately. Hard to make sense of that, right? Just the last few seasons have just not been strong. Senior Dog 54 says, who's more likely to right the ship? Is the Braves, the Phils? Both of them are scuffling right now. Yeah, I mean, Atlanta obviously not having success with New York. I did see where it looks like Tarek Skubal now favored to go to the Dodgers. I mean, can you believe that if they end up getting him? Because, I mean, this is the one thing. It seems to me that the Braves are just going to slip out of it if they don't have a big boost with the trade deadline. Now, I never really expect them to get Skubal, but they need to better themselves. Otherwise, they just don't have enough pitching to get through there. I tell you, Chris Sale's amazing, though. I mean, Chris Sale is – the Braves have had so many great starting pitchers, obviously, in my lifetime, but Sale's right up there. He's really, really good. You'd love to see anybody giving you anything close to what he's giving you, but I have to admit, I don't have a ton of confidence in the Braves right now. I don't. Let's see what else. West Jade Dog Fan says, what kind of condiments will Ole Miss bring out for their game with Lane Kiffin's return? It reminds me of what Josh Heupel said last week at Media Days. Like, he joked about the mustard bottles and the golf balls. It's pretty good line from him. And we said this. It's so weird to me that Heupel came and went at Media Days and almost generated no buzz whatsoever. That to me is strange that he's so under the radar here right now. Gary Roach says, I look like I think he's talking to me, that I just stepped off a out of GQ magazine. Well, I'll take that as a huge compliment, Gary. Thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate that. That's really nice to hear. Incredibly nice. Randy wondering about the Joe Moore Award. I mean, last couple of seasons we'd say that Georgia hasn't been Joe Moore worthy probably, but I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic for that group here this year. I am. Pretty optimistic with that group. Wyatt asked about having Josh Brooks on the show. Yeah, maybe one of these days we'll do that. So we've done some stuff with him here and there. Have we actually had him as a guest? I'm trying to remember. Maybe we'll do that at some point. All right, let's go back to John Hayes, by the way, says that Florida could lose 6 or more games this year. Yeah, I'm definitely under on Florida. I think their win total 7.5. That's their projected. I'd go under that. I really would. You know, it's becoming a little bit of a everybody singing from the same hymn book when it comes to Florida. Boy, people are so sure about Buster Faulkner and, my gosh, Aaron Philo. And listen, I like Aaron a lot. I don't have anything bad to say about him, and I like Buster Faulkner a lot too. But, you know, Aaron was the backup at Georgia Tech. Now, weird things happen in college football all the time, but this notion that Florida is going to be resurrected because of Georgia Tech's backup quarterback, I don't know. Maybe that's going to happen. Maybe it is. And certainly, you know, we'll be disappointed if it does because we don't like Florida, not because we don't like Philo. We just don't like Florida. But gosh, when everybody's unanimous agreement of, oh my gosh, Buster Faulkner, and oh my gosh, Aaron Philo, and oh my gosh, Jon Sumrall, he's throwing podiums at reporters, he's painting his toenails, he's just a content machine. Seems like a lot. Starts to feel like a lot. And as a simple rule, we like to position ourselves on the opposite side of the prevailing logic, and it's becoming pretty easy to do that when it comes to Florida here right now. All right, let me go back to Facebook, then we'll come back to YouTube one more time before we wrap it up here for a Thursday. On Facebook. Miriam Corbin says the voice has been sounding great. Thank you very much, Miriam. I have worked pretty hard on it. I really have. And I'm like you. She says, well, I hope it continues that way for the season because it was early fall last year when it just went south. And I'm going to try to take better care of myself. You know, when I go to my kids' sporting events, I don't cheer at all. I just clap. You know, I don't say anything. Just try to keep my mouth shut because, that strains me. Being in the banquet hall yesterday, you notice some of that because it's loud. You're trying to talk over the crowd. I noticed a little bit of that. So I try to prevent that. You know, I'm not the life of the party in a public setting anymore just because I can't talk over crowds quite as much. But I do try to take care of my voice. And as we get to the start of the season, this is where it got bad. So I'm going to really work hard to do that too. You know, I'll tell you that. Go back and hear some of like the videos that Cody put together and stuff like that. On some of these, my voice sounded so bad. I can't believe how bad it was at times a year ago. But it's been better as of late. We got to get ready to go here too. All right, so let me read one more from Marshall Fleming, then we'll get ready to wrap it up here for today. He says, I believe if we go 9-3, so if Texas goes 9-3, Sark gets fired, I would guess he goes 11-1 in season. We beat them in the SEC championship game. Could be that. I mean, it would certainly be an interesting contest just simply because of, just the contrast that exists between the two teams. Building a completely different way, everything about that being totally different. I could certainly see that being quite a matchup, Marshall. That's really good stuff. All right. We have got to go for now. Y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time, doing the work that's promised, the prices promised, including getting your AC unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs, keeping you cool and comfortable with a well-running air conditioning unit. That is certainly a generous act here in this very, very hot summer. Yes, y'all check out RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com, and I will see you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.